All right, Xenia, so here is a map that I drew. Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware. Okay, here is Richmond, which we were talking about with the 7 days battle in the last lecture. Here's the James River coming out into the Chesapeake Bay. And then here is the Potomac River right here with DC along the Potomac River, which comes around this way, okay? Potomac River here. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is the Confederate offense that follows the survival after the Peninsula Campaign. McClellan's invasion into Virginia fails, largely because McClellan is hesitant, fearful of committing his troops, doesn't go for it, versus Lee, who is a gambler, takes great risks and oftentimes accomplishes enormous results with what he has. So that Peninsula Campaign failed definitively with the 7 days battle. Okay, and so Lincoln at this point has lost faith in McClellan. He doesn't believe McClellan has the stomach to fight Lee, okay? And so he decides he's going to withdraw McClellan from the peninsula. McClellan indicated he'd be willing to try again. Remember, he'd retreated down here to the James River in the aftermath of the 7 days battle, okay? McClellan says, look, I can try again. Lincoln says, no, actually, okay? And so McClellan is going to have to retreat back to D.C. to protect the capital, okay? Now, Anyway, okay, so now McClellan is not happy about this. He writes these like sulky, like angsty letters to his wife complaining about it. McClellan is also a Democrat, so he's in the opposite party of Lincoln. And a lot of the Democrats are already in communication with McClellan, trying to get him to undermine the president, okay? And so McClellan isn't at that point yet, but he is privately, starting to be very critical also of the president, very unhappy with this decision to go back to D.C., okay? But look, it's his own fault, okay? He doesn't attack, okay? When he should a lot of times. Okay, look, probably, if he's going to be a good general, that is an effective general, yeah. Okay, all right, so Lincoln is going to withdraw McClellan, and Lee is going to pursue him. So again, the way to think about Lee is that he is a gambler. He takes enormous risks, okay? And so what Lee's going to do is he's going to continue to do what he had started to do down there in the 7 days battle, right? Which is to defy military common sense, or not common sense, common knowledge, right? And what he's going to do is he has a smaller force than the Army of the Potomac. Lee is in charge of the Army of Northern Virginia. McClellan is in charge of the Army of the Potomac. McClellan's army is much larger. Lee's is much smaller. Lee is going to try to compensate for that by kind of counterintuitively dividing his army apart so that one section can go around and find an isolated portion of McClellan's army and attack that one portion. It's the same thing he did at the 7 days battle, right? When he would use his scouts to identify where is the vulnerable point, where is an isolated group in the Union Army, and then I'm going to send a bunch of guys around, outmaneuver, that is, outrun the enemy, get to that isolated group, attack, and then get out of there and gain victories that way. Okay, so he continues to do that, and he's pursuing the Union North. Okay, so he sends Jackson, the hero of the Shenandoah campaign, right up here, and there's a little battle at with some Union troops, and then Jackson does this enormous march. He marches 50 miles in 2 days with his men, and it's one of the great marches of the war. Comes up, reaches Manassas, where you had that first battle back in 1861, and burns a bunch of Union supplies after his men get to eat there. Okay, so then the Union rush up here. All right, Jackson is reinforced by Lee and other generals. and there's another battle here at Manassas called Second Manassas, okay? And it's a, so Second Manassas. Okay, and look, McClellan probably could have defeated Lee's or Jackson before this Second Manassas battle had taken place if he had sent more troops to commit when these little skirmishes were happening here outside, south of D.C. McClellan didn't do it. He told Lincoln, no, I don't want to send any more people down there. I want to mass everybody up here to protect the capital. Lincoln, like, what are you doing? You crazy? You need to send them down there to crush the enemy, but he didn't do it, right? So then basically what happens is the South gets up here to Manassas. The Union meets them. Battle of Second Manassas. It's a Confederate victory, and the Confederates push the Union back. The Union has to retreat to D.C., okay? And it's a disaster for the Union, essentially, okay? And it's here in this battle when Lincoln's Secretary of War calls for the volunteer nurses to come about. A lot of them are men, and they're really not good nurses, and a lot of them show up drunk to try to take care of the soldiers. Not good. But you also have Clara Barton coming out with the women nurses, and they're working around the clock trying to take care of the wounded. But the Union has been defeated, and there's a Union retreat to D.C. Okay, disaster for the Union. All right. Now, Lee at this point decides he's not okay with this. He's pushed the Union back. He's got them on the run. He's actually 20 miles away from the capital of the United States. He could attack it if he wanted to, 20 miles from D.C. And with his smaller force of men, he's had incredible strategic success, right? Not only did he save Richmond, but he's pushed the enemy back up to D.C., and now he's on the verge of, if he wants to, invading it, okay? Lee does decide he's going to invade, but not D.C. He's going to go for Maryland. He decides D.C. is too strongly defended. His men are too exhausted, but they're going to go 30 miles north and cross over into Maryland. That's where the invasion is going to happen, okay? That is Lee's plan. And what he wants to do is he wants to cut railroad ties going down to D.C., cut D.C. off from the rest of the North, okay? He wants to pull the battle up here into the Union territory. His men are going to forage, that is, they're going to confiscate whatever food they find in the fields and so on and so forth, fend for themselves, maybe pay for it, maybe barter, maybe not, whatever. Fend for themselves up here, but that's going to draw the conflict north, which is going to give a little bit of rest to Virginia and allow for Virginia farmers to actually get some work done and maybe have a little bit more of a successful growing season, because the food supply is starting to be a big problem for the South, not just for the soldiers, for the civilians too. There's a food shortage. Food is getting more expensive. It's getting very difficult for people in the South. So he wants to draw the conflict out and move it up into the north. That's the plan there. All right, the plan is not going to work very well for a couple of reasons. Number one is that one thing Lee is expecting is that the people of Maryland are going to support the rebels once they invade. That is not the case. The Marylanders do not come out in support of the rebels, do not aid them in the way that the local population had aided Stonewall Jackson when he was fighting in the mountains over here in the Shenandoah Valley, okay? Right, the valley is between the peaks of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I don't know if I made that clear yesterday, but Stonewall Jackson's Shenandoah campaign happening in the mountains and in the valley between the peaks of the Blue Ridge Mountains, Appalachian Trail. Okay, look, another problem for Lee is that once he gets into Maryland, he doesn't have good supply lines back here. The Confederates had held Harper's Ferry, okay, that had happened earlier in the spring. But they lose it. The Union take Harper's Ferry, and they cut the rebel supply lines between the Shenandoah Valley over here and where they're going to be in Maryland. So they don't need supplies for food, so to speak, because they're going to live off of what they can find, but they need supply lines for ammunition. And so that's another reason why it's not going to go as well as Lee hopes for, okay? Okay, so that's the kind of overview for the Confederate offensive. It's going to lead up to one of the worst battles of the war, a battle called Antietam, Okay, and so just a few words on the lead up to this battle of Antietam. Okay, so this little X here is the Battle of Second Manassas. This one up here, that's where Antietam is. One of the worst battles of the war. Okay, one of the worst battles of the war here at Antietam. Okay, so a little bit of prelude here to this battle. So you've got Lee. Hang on. Okay, I'm back. Prelude to this Battle of Antietam. All right, so Lee needed to re-secure the supply line. So what he had to do was he had to divide the army again. He had to send some of them back from Maryland back into towards Harper's Ferry to try to take Harper's Ferry. So his army's been divided. Okay, McClellan finds out about this. A scout discovers some orders that had been lost, showing McClellan exactly what Lee's plan is, okay? So McClellan gets this intelligence. He gets this enormous opportunity to actually go exactly where Lee is going to be and destroy the army because he's got superior numbers, okay? Now, McClellan is actually going to attack this time, but he waits 18 hours so he can kind of carefully plan for this. Okay, this gives Lee enough time to organize. Why? Because a spy in Maryland carries the information to Lee that McClellan knows what his plans are. So Lee can start consolidating his forces to prepare for a battle. If he hadn't gotten that information that McClellan knew about the orders, he would have been out of luck, but he got the information, so it buys him a little bit of time, okay? The other thing that happens is that Lee gets intelligence that Harper's Ferry falls. It's taken by the rebels that he had sent over there, and now they're going to be coming back to join him, and they're going to hopefully keep the supply line for ammunition open, okay? And so Lee decides, rather than retreat in order to avoid war with the McClellan's army, which is larger, he's going to take the gamble. He's going to hope that these guys get back from Harper's Ferry in time to help him, and he's going to hope that they can hold out long enough against the larger numbers that McClellan has in order to wait for those reinforcements. So again, Lee, the gambler, he's going to stay. He's going to plant his feet here along Antietam Creek, and he's going to wait for McClellan, basically daring McClellan to attack him. That's the prelude to the battle there, all right? So the Confederate offense leads up to an invasion of Maryland, and then that leads up to this battle, Antietam, which we're going to cover in the next lecture.